Success in Radio. It's all about what's next. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and sign up for your free weekly newsletter. You'll also get 3 free reports. The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.
Well, if you've been listening to the show for any amount of time, the Financial Survival Network, you know these are momentous times. A big domino just fell in the past week. You know I'm talking about the daily silver fix as of August 14th, 2014. It will be no more. What is the significance of this event? Well, we've got Bix Weir on to examine it now. Bix, welcome back.
Hey, Kerry, how you doing?
All right, man. So this is a biggie, right?
Well, yeah, a lot of people saying it's not a biggie. I'm saying it's gigantic. It's gigantic because it's the benchmark number that all these silver and gold derivatives are based off. You take the fix away, all of a sudden these contracts have no benchmark. What are they going to price this silver, from? COMEX is futures and options, not the physical price of silver. There is no other physical price of silver in any exchange around the world. What are these contracts? When they go to court, the winner is going to say, hey, you got to pay me X amount. The loser is going to say, what do you mean? There is no London fix. There is no price associated with this contract. It's in complete chaos.
Right. And, let's connect some dots here, Bix. All of the major banks have gotten out of commodities, correct? Barclays, JP Morgan, and the others, correct?
Well, they're trying to get out. They still own, I think it's, in silver, it's $50 billion worth of derivatives. They're getting out of like the visible stuff, and they're giving that to the hedge funds, people like BlackRock and companies that really don't have to report to the powers that be and to the regulators. So, yeah, they're getting out. The hedge funds are taking their position to continue the rig. But it is a time when more and more scrutiny is going on to the manipulation of gold and silver. And it's really exciting about what's going on.
Yeah, so this is profound, isn't it?
It's huge. It's the mere fact that all these companies are leaving this 100-year fix that they don't you love the name, the London fix? It's just classic. But the fact that everybody is running for the hills when it comes to gold and silver derivatives, and the guys out of London where all these derivatives were written is just a glaring spotlight on the fact that these derivatives are all breaking down and they have the potential to destroy the entire global monetary complex. They're going to try to keep it together with Scotch tape, but it's really getting harder and harder.
Yeah, so we're looking at a potential cataclysm here. They're going to have to come up with something. What are they going to come up with? If they don't have the fix, how do they create a price? Is there a free market then? God forbid.
Well, it'll take a while for an exchange to start up and that just trades physical gold and silver without any derivatives and without any of the stuff that goes on. It's funny. I watched an interview with Jeffrey Christian. Now, Jeffrey Christian is a huge proponent of gold and silver derivatives. Him and Robert Rubin started the gold and silver derivative business really back in the 80s. And, it's kind of his fault that all these contracts are pegged to the London fix. And he came on saying, we don't know what to do. We were surprised about this, the closing of the silver fix on, they announced it for August 14th. And he's saying, well, we got to figure something out. Maybe we can go electronic fix. Give me a break. If it's easy to rig a fix that they make phone calls, a couple guys sitting around making phone calls, how easy is it to rig an electronic system? The whole thing is falling apart. Jeffrey Christian should take a huge part of the blame because he's the guy, along with the guys at Goldman Sachs, who really started the large gold and silver derivative complex that rigs the market these days.
Yeah, actually, I think this thing went back 117 years. I mean, I'd love to see the office there and the seats. It must be all leather. I mean, look, Deutsche Bank is out of it because the German government basically forced them out, right? HSBC.
Yeah, they're all getting out.
Yeah, Bank of Nova Scotia, they're out of it, right? So what happened here? I mean, I want to know the real story of why this thing is breaking up? Because there's got to be a real story here, Bix,
of course,
what's going on.
It's just, these prices were set just like LIBOR was set. And they have done investigations into the gold and silver fixed, and they have found proof that it was being rigged. Now, GATA has been saying all along for 15 years, it's rigged, it's rigged, it's rigged. They've been laughed at by everybody, and now even in Germany they had this network news show about rigging the price of gold, and the truth is coming out now. And I do believe there are investigations. I know there's investigations going on behind the scenes into the London fix for both gold and silver, but because all these banks that ran it are getting out so fast, it pretty much proves that they've got enough proof to bust them, and this could bust the whole gold and silver complex wide open. But where does it go from there? There is no physical market for gold and silver, where there's no exchanges where we can say, oh, here's the price of gold and silver. It was always the London fix. So, what happens next? Who knows? Can the COMEX still trade futures and options in gold and silver if there's no price of the physical metal underlying it anywhere in the world? It's getting really ugly, and there's going to be a lot of heads rolling and a lot of chaos coming up really soon.
Yeah, it's just, we're really heading into the twilight zone, aren't we?
Yeah, but we've been talking about this for years, and it almost happened in 2008. We were really close to it, and Hank Paulson came into Congress with a gun and demanded all this money, and they've been rigging the market ever since. But ultimately, it's the best thing for the United States because we're the largest debtor nation in the world, and there's no way we can ever pay off this debt. The only thing we can do is default, and that's kind of where the U.S. is pushing it as we piss off Russia, we piss off China. I mean, those are our two largest, debtor. They're the ones who have all the U.S. dollar, U.S. treasuries. They start dumping that, which they already are, and all we're doing is poking them because we want them to destroy the dollar. We can blame them, and then the whole thing falls apart, and all of a sudden we have no more debt.
Mm-hmm. I'm just looking at the articles, and what's interesting is none of the large media companies, there's one article from CNBC covering this, and all they do is, what is the London silver fix? That's all they're covering on it. What is it? And it's three guys in a room figuring out what the price of silver is going to be. And perhaps the biggest significance here, Bix, of the thing is that it paves the way for the end of the gold fix, right? Maybe that's the biggest. Maybe that's the biggest significance.
When you look at the derivatives based on silver versus the derivatives based on gold blows it away just because of the dollar is involved. So yes, the gold fix is next on the chopping block. People were surprised, Jeffrey Christian especially, that they announced the end of the silver fix. Now they're not going to be that surprised when they announce the end of the gold fix. And truthfully, it's the best thing for everybody. This fix was not only fixing the prices, supposedly in silver, the LBMA, which is where the fix is located, the LBMA was transferring, I think it's 139 million ounces on a daily average, which is completely ridiculous. Every year, over 100 billion ounces of silver were traded. It wasn't a physical market. It was all derivatives.
Sure, paper.
It was all smoke and mirrors. Yep.
Hey,
exactly it.
I have a great idea, Bix. Why don't you, me, and Bill Murphy get together and we'll start our own fix? What do you think?
We got to change the name, though. Yeah, just the whole concept of the fix.
We'll call it the unfix.
It's like them saying, hey, we're not lying to you. We're rigging the prices. We'll even tell you by calling it the fix.
We'll call it the WML unfix. And whatever I'm willing to pay you, you'll pay me. Or Bill will pay either one of us. That'll be the price.
Yeah,
what do you think?
Jeffrey Christian would use that in his derivative contracts. It'd work perfectly.
I think we're on to something, but I'm going to start the price at 150. What do you think?
150 million maybe. Nobody knows the price of silver. I keep telling everybody that. Nobody knows. What is the price of silver? Nobody. It's been rigged for so long. Nobody knows. I wouldn't be surprised if well, first of all, I think the COMEX and the LBMA will shut down as functioning markets because they're both criminal enterprises. But where does the price of silver go? In U.S. dollar terms, does it go
wherever
to
we want it to go.
1,000?
Bix, wherever we want it to go. That's the answer.
The mere fact that there is less silver in the world than gold tells me, and silver is more important in industrial uses, tells me that the price of silver should be higher than the price of gold.
Oh, we can also get Andy Hoffman in on this one too.
Yeah, we can't leave Andy out.
Yeah, we got to have Andy. So we'll have four of us. And I think we have more credibility than these banksters any day of the week. We actually have some silver between us, probably more than the banks had themselves.
We don't want to get in the middle of all that garbage. All we're asking for is a freely traded market where producers of physical silver, miners, can get together and sell it to people who need it and want to invest in it. Get all these derivatives out, get all the paper contracts out, get the exchanges out, get everybody out of silver.
Here's a great quote. You want to hear a great quote?
Yeah.
All right. For example, the Royal Canadian Mint uses the benchmark to price its silver coins and bars. The mint said it was evaluating options. It is a hassle. They are used to using it, said Andrew Leyland, manager of precious metals demand at research firm Thomson Reuters GFMS. The market is not going to collapse because this piece of information is not there. There will be more uncertainty, but ultimately, these are prices that trade 24/7, he said.
Reuters bought GFMS. GFMS, it's everybody says, oh, that's the stalwart. That's where you get your gold and silver numbers. GFMS came up with those numbers in the 60s, and it was owned by Harry Oppenheimer of the De Beers family. And if you tell me that the De Beers family doesn't rig the price of diamonds, and then they come up with gold and silver numbers on supply and demand, GFMS is criminal. And everything they say since the 60s has been designed to rig the numbers one way or the other. The whole system is falling apart.
All right. We got more on this on the other side, talking with Bix Weir on the Financial Survival Network.
FSN Radio. It's all about what's next.
Urgent alert. Ex-Secret Service agent claims it's worse than people know. One of Obama's former Secret Service agents recently smelled a rat. What he discovered inside our government was so devastating, he only saw one option. He quit. What's worse, he fears what he found could affect your job, your neighborhood, and most importantly, your family, very soon. It's worse than people know, he said in a recent interview, and I'm not trying to scare you either. We too share his concerns. This is why we've devoted the better part of 3 years collecting solutions for nearly all problems created by intrusive governments, and we've succeeded. Go to hiddensecrets1.info to check out all the details. Our panel of insiders have devised a legal but sneaky set of solutions to help you reclaim your privacy from the NSA, opt out of Obamacare, and make a bundle from little-known investments and small business opportunities. Simply visit hiddensecrets1.info. That's Hidden Secrets, the number 1.info.
FSN Radio.
When your accountant wants tax-free income, this is what he does. Accountants know the law. They also know that any American could legally get paid up to 3 times per month, 100% tax-free. That's 36 tax-free checks each year. It doesn't matter what you make already. This simple strategy could work for anyone. Go to www.irsrevenge2.com to learn how. That's IRSrevenge, the number 2.com.
The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.
We're back on the Financial Survival Network. We're talking with Bix Weir. And, an interesting thing, Bix, is the fact that you basically had identical parties setting the price of gold and silver. What a shock that the prices of these two precious metals, assuming that you consider silver a precious metal, of course, parallel themselves Isn't that shocking?
Well, I've long said in order to run an unbacked fiat system, you have to control the price of gold and silver, and that's what they've done. This is the longest it's ever lasted. We've been off the gold standard since 71,
Mm-hmm.
and the only reason it has lasted so long is because they rigged the prices using computers and derivatives. And I've gone back years to show exactly who invented these computer programs, when they came into play, who's writing the derivatives, how they control the price up, down, sideways. It's so obvious now, and I hope everybody understands that what they see on TV when the price of silver comes up has nothing to do with reality.
Yeah, and reality is a nebulous concept at best.
Especially these days.
Yeah, and certainly when you're dealing with precious metals prices, and you're dealing with money printing and bonds and derivatives and fixing all over the place, all over the planet, and let's face it, but we're getting into it now. I mean, this is really it, isn't it?
I think so. Yeah. I mean, if we could see the back rooms of these companies that trade in derivatives, and most of them are out of London. Most of the derivatives are written out of London. Out of the, J.P. Morgan was the biggest. You've heard of the whale stuff. There was a lot more going on than they admit to. But these, we're not talking about billions of dollars. We're talking about hundreds of trillions, even quadrillions of dollars that are written in derivatives just to control interest rates and gold and silver and the price of oil and commodities and you name it. And they have to keep piling more and more of these fictitious derivatives on to control the price. And that's where we are. That's why it is so important that even the smallest counterpart in the derivative world has to stay solvent, because all these contracts, there's a seller and a buyer of every single derivative, and that's why they had to hold these banks together. When a big bank fails, all of a sudden you have a cascading effect on the derivatives, because it's the counterparty risk that nobody thinks about. Yeah, J.P. Morgan can, make money on every commodity trade for the past 10 years, but that means somebody's losing money, and those losers, the weaker they get, as soon as one of them fails, all of a sudden you have no counterparty to pay you. And then the derivatives that you wrote to cover your last derivatives, just to balance your book, as Blythe Masters says, starts to go bad, and then the whole system falls apart. That's where we were in 2008, and that's what's coming down the line.
Yeah, and then you have the government bailing out an AIG so that Goldman Sachs and J.P. Morgan and Deutsche Bank, all of them can get paid, right?
That's exactly it. But today, in today's day and age, with all the information that we've learned over the last 5 years about what went down in 2008, do you think anybody in Congress could stand up and bail out another bank or another AIG type of thing? I don't think it's going to happen.
I think they'd be hard pressed. That's for sure. Right?
Yeah, and what are the ramifications of that? Well, if you don't bail these companies out, then that too big to fail that everybody's afraid of happens, and we learn why it is so important that none of these gigantic gigantic banks fail, because they're all interconnected. They lend money to each other, they have deals with each other, and they're all leveraged 20, 30 to 1. So all they have to lose is 5% of their tier 1 capital, and they're insolvent.
They're gone. And they're really insolvent anyway.
It's true. And then, you get the runs on the banks. That's what's coming up. People are going to say, wait a minute, my 401ks and the stock market and all that, that's just as much of a fraud. These companies don't buy stock in a company. When you buy it online, they net everything out, and there's over 100, I think it's over 300 million failure to delivers every single day on the stock market, meaning that companies don't exchange the certificate or the title for the money within 3 days. That's the law. Over 300 million every single day. So these companies like Schwab and Fidelity, they'll take your money in, they'll credit your account, but they won't actually go out and buy the stock. They'll use that money to leverage their own bets. It's absolutely
do they get
out of
away
control.
with that?
And they get away with it because the DTCC is the most criminal organization, even worse than the Fed. And I was supposed to do a show on the History Channel about the conspiracy stuff, and they axed it. I interviewed with them for 3 hours, and it was supposed to be aired last Saturday, and they pulled the show and with no explanation.
Unbelievable. Is that 300 million?
300 million shares fail to deliver every single day. And, how can the DTCC ever settle these high-frequency trades with 1 million shares trading in a second? They don't. They're supposed to settle these trades in 3 days, meaning there's a transfer of money and a transfer of title. And they just don't. They just pray that the music keeps playing, and there's so many naked shorts out there that they just, especially in the mining companies, that it's impossible to recommend buying a mining company because there's 5, 10, 20 times the float is traded on every 2 or 3 days. It's completely out of control. When the music stops, you're going to have 50 people saying, hey, I own a share of XYZ mining company, and everybody owns that same share. It's bad.
That's really high frequency fraud.
Oh, yeah. And it's all done out of the change from physical certificates and money. People in New York drive it. In the 50s and 60s, there's all these messenger guys going back and forth with shares and certificates.
I remember them.
And in the 60s, it all went. Late 60s, it all went to computers, and the computers meant you didn't have to settle a thing. And that's what the DTCC hides in their in that vault at 55 Water Street that flooded during Hurricane Sandy. $36 trillion worth of paper derivative contracts and stocks and bearer bonds were in the basement of 55 Water Street, and that whole thing flooded for over a month.
I know exactly where that building is, too. It's right around the corner from my old office down there. I always hated Lower Manhattan. Could never get away from the place, but always hated it. Now it's just a big housing center, but once upon a time.
Underground, it's these real interesting things. Underground, in that there's a 3 or 4 block radius. You have the Federal Reserve of New York, where they store all the gold in the ground. You have right next to that the JP Morgan vault that they sold the building to China. It's the biggest vault in the world. And then next to that is the DTCC vault. All these vaults supposedly are connected with tunnels, secret tunnels that they can, ship gold back and forth, and who knows what's coming in and out of the DTCC vault. That's where every single paper contract is held in the basement at 55 Water Street, and that flooded. And then after they pumped the water out, it caught fire, and there was this huge fire where they had to evacuate, and 20 people went to the hospital. It's just the whole thing is so out of control, and a lot of this is the banksters and the people who have committed crimes trying to cover their tracks.
Well, the only thing that's more dangerous being a banker right now is being a high-ranking member of the Communist Party in China, because over 60 of them have died under mysterious circumstances in the past year. I don't know if you read that.
I did, and that it is a huge, dangerous game, and the bankers are in trouble. Nobody knows if it's the good guys or bad guys taking these bankers out. And then just today, the head banker of JP Morgan in China,
he got arrested.
Yeah. And China doesn't mess around when they arrest guys who pull off banking fraud and things like that. Their laws are kind of a lot tougher than ours.
To the head in a field, basically.
Yeah.
Within 48 hours of your trial, that's the sentence is executed. So,
And talk about a warning to the United States after, we charged 4 other guys with espionage. Mm-hmm. Literally 2 days later, we got the JP Morgan. JP Morgan knows exactly what's going on in China with China's buying over 2,000 tons of gold every year and has been for decades.
Yeah.
China has more gold than anybody by far. So it's interesting.
Yep, and it's going to get more interesting as we go along. So any idea what the timetable is going to be now?
People ask me that all the time. And they say, well, when's it all going to happen? And my answer is, it's not when it's going to happen. It's happening right now. When's it going to end is the big question.
Yeah, that's really it.
With so much going on, it is happening. All you have to do is open your eyes and look around and see all these things that are, the dominoes have been dropping for a long, long time. When the last domino hits, I don't know, but that'll be a scary moment.
Yeah, well, we're getting ever closer, so we find you where, Bix?
RoadToRuta.com.
All right, roadtoruta.com, link on the financialsurvivalnetwork.com. Don't forget to sign up for the newsletter. We'll talk with you again real soon, Bix. Thanks.
Sounds good. Thanks, Kerry.
FSN Radio. It's all about what's next. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and sign up for your free weekly newsletter. You'll also get 3 free reports. The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.